Um, so what I've got here is just another couple of slides just to really give context around what we're going to see today. K2 and Office 365 demo, the scenario really, we have an on-premise SharePoint 2013 list and libraries. We also have some dynamic CRM, obviously a little bit of Active Directory as well, and we've got some K2 components, server components installed in this environment as well. So K2 Smart Forms is our forms-based technology product. Along with that is our workflow product called K2 Black Pearl, and K2 for SharePoint is also part of the suite and included with the whole suite. And it's K2 for SharePoint is the integration components between SharePoint and K2, both in the cloud and also on-premise. So in the Office 365 side of things, we're just going to see a site with some lists I've set up, and the scenario being really it's a theoretical scenario around contractor management. Potentially a construction company wants to build a whole bunch of building skyscrapers infrastructure for some customers, and they will be using some vendors from an approved vendor list to allow those contractors to enter timesheets, and that timesheet information will flow back to an on-premise approved projects list. Okay, so there's a few moving parts to all this. Really, the idea is to get across that all your on-premise information, which K2 can see, is very accessible and very easy to build quick forms and views and things like that in both your on-premise and Office 365. You're not really limited by going to the cloud with Office 365 and K2, and it helps to get over some of those challenges of Office 365 where maybe part of your business has gone to Office 365 and they now want to access their data that's now sitting on-prem. Is that a migration? Is that an integration component? Well, with K2, it's really seamless, as you'll see today. So in order to put together this this demo today, I've used the core components of K2, which is forms, workflow, data, and reporting. As you'll see in the K2 for SharePoint application in SharePoint, the K2 does a certain amount of auto creation of these elements for me. I don't necessarily need to go in there and manually create these elements. So K2 does a lot of that effort for us, and enables us to just get up and running as quick as possible. Looking at my last slide, just where K2 is positioned in the whole world of systems and data and cloud and on-premise and all that. K2 is really, it's as Tony already said, it's not dependent on SharePoint, which gives us an extremely nice position around integration. We have connectors into all sorts of back-end systems, and I suppose SharePoint and CRM are obvious ones, and Office 365 as well, so which you'll see today. So enough of PowerPoint. Let's just jump into our on-premise environment. So here I've just got Microsoft Dynamics CRM open. We're going to use this list as an example of our customers today. You'll see there, Microsoft, Jenkins, Retail. So just some sample data around Microsoft CRM. On the SharePoint side of things, I've just set up a couple of lists, very simple site, a couple of lists. We've got an approved vendors list, which you've probably got in an ERP system around if they're not an approved vendor, they can't be paid. So what we're going to do is just set up a new vendor for the purpose of the demo. Guiding Solutions, PTY. Let's give them a number, and that way we can follow that through the demo today. So the other list, which is independent to the approved vendors list, is approved customer projects. Here I've got really a bunch of projects that are running. This list might be the outcome of like a business case approval process where you put forward your business case, or maybe even a tender process where once you've won a project, how do you manage that project from a project management perspective with costings and expenditure and things like that. And that's what we'll see today. How can we take a situation like contracted timesheeting? How can we get someone external to the organisation potentially logging into maybe Office 365, submitting timesheets and putting in some contractor information and that flowing back through into our main list of approved projects and total costs. Okay, so what I've done here is really, there's not a lot of frills around these particular lists. The SharePoint list with custom columns. What I have done is I've enabled the K2 application. So we'll go through the example and then I'll build a brand new list and show you how easy it is to set all this up. When I'm going to create a new item for this particular list, you'll see this form here is not a standard SharePoint form. I've enabled the K2 application, like I just said, and that will that basically enabled me to quickly customize this and integrate this particular form into my existing on-premise information or data. Okay, so when I fill out a new project, for, we're going to build a new football stadium, and the customer, I want to use my customer list from my Microsoft CRM that we just saw. Easy to integrate, and using a K2 picker control, I can select a customer name that is already, it's not a free text field, it's already enterprise data, and it'll hopefully stop any mistakes with data entry and things like that as well. So quite helpful. Budget, a new football stadium might cost a fair amount of money. Let's go for 50 million. Okay, and total cost or total expenses against this project are none because it's a brand new project. Okay, so we've just set up a bit of, it's just an example of your on-premise data. And I'm just going to switch over to Office 365 and see how we can use that data to better enable external people or anyone on Office 365 to use this data in their processes that happen in Office 365. Okay, so switching over to Office 365, again, here's a very simple site that I've set up with a couple of lists down the side. I've got a contractors list, talking to the story, basically a contractor from this particular vendor, approved vendor list that we've already got in our organisation wants to come on site and help us build this new football stadium. So what can I do here? I mean, what I've done is basically create a K2 enabled list again. So again, all it is really just a SharePoint list that I've taken, and I've clicked on the K2 app and used or generated forms and views for this particular list. Okay, and again, that's made me able to customize this list extensively, and I can do cool things like set up contractor names and things like that. So really, here's an example. I'm going to set myself up as a contractor. Here's a vendor list coming back from my my approved vendor list on premise. So that's in the cloud. Current allocated project. So maybe when I come in to put in my timesheet, I want to default a project to the new football stadium, for example. Just really to help me choose which current project I'm currently working on, and I want to maybe capture some other information about this particular contractor, like have they done a safety induction, what their rate is, their charge rate, $100 an hour, and maybe some other information around mobile information and things like that. So all this data is being captured in Office 365. Maybe we didn't have a contracting system on site, or maybe it wasn't suitable, or maybe this is an extension of it. So when I actually create that contractor, obviously that contractor gets added into the SharePoint list. So what I've also done is just to explain or highlight the flexibility that a K2 form gives you in this particular sense. What I can actually do is I'll send out a link. So there's a link I've got here, which is a link to exactly this same form, which will enable, I've actually anonymously enabled access to this form. So anyone on the call can actually log in, and I'll put it in the chat window, but if you're on a mobile or something like that, you can actually type that into your mobile and have a look at it and see how that looks on your particular screens. So I'll just give you a minute to sort of maybe log in there, and we should see some names or stage names come up. But it's a good example of really showing that these external contractors don't really have to be in our Active Directory system. They could be, outside the organisation. We don't have to particularly go through a whole bunch of hurdles really to get people up and running in the system. So it can be used in many situations or business processes, I think. So we can see some funny names, as always happens, come through. But there's a good example of our contractor list, and feeding from that contractor list, let's have a look at our contractor timesheets. Okay, so the same sort of anonymous access I could have set up for the contractor timesheet. Really, what I want to highlight here is really the diversity of information that I've customized into this list, and very, very easily you can see that I saw the name of Ben Stiller, so let's try Stiller. Ben Stiller, so we can see that he's part of that particular vendor, so we're pulling back information from our Office 365 list. We're also pulling back some project information, so when this particular person got added into the list, we can see that a default project was selected. So, there's quite a lot going on this form. As an example too, I mean, I've left it as a drop-down. So Ben Stiller might be working on a couple of different projects. If he could change the project information, and what we can see on the right-hand side is another view of the CRM information from our Microsoft Dynamics on-premise CRM system. So really, it's all about displaying information that allows the person filling out the form to have the information that they need in order to make the best decision at the time. So that's where I think K2 makes it extremely easy to surface information and make it easy to fill out the particular form. So let's just go ahead and fill out a few more of these. Ben Stiller probably did 20 hours for us. He's not a hard worker. It's all about looks. You can see there was a rate and also some calculations done for a total amount. Approver has to go through me, otherwise they don't get paid. So they could be the project manager, and again, just as easy to default that sort of information and have it fill out automatically based on sort of your contractor list or your on-premise data even. Okay, so you can put in any sort of comments. So please pay ASAP, and potentially, what I like about K2 is you can actually go into you can surface information. And at the time of filling out the form, you could, if you wanted to, allow someone to go in there and change their mobile number and things like that. Or on that change, you could flow that information back to whatever systems are sort of maintaining this sort of information. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you design forms, and the data around creating, reading, writing, updating, and the actions when that sort of data can be updated. Okay, we can see there's a status not approved at the moment, so I'm just going to submit that off. What that's doing is going to start a workflow for me. That workflow is going to send me as an approver a task, and I'm just going to open up that task and show you how K2 workflows can surface tasks in a variety of ways, just like how it can surface data in a variety of ways as well. So me as a project manager, we can see that Ben Stiller's got 20 grand waiting for us for Project Altitude. I might log into my computer the next day, or even later that day, I might come into the office, and I could find my intranet page, so I can log into the portal, for example, and this intranet might just have my tasks list. So tasks can be surfaced anywhere you want, really. You could have them on the bottom of every single form. You can have them in an intranet style setup, like you can sort of see here. But also, you know, these mobile apps to allow you to access your tasks. Yeah, there's a variety of different ways, both for iOS and Android. So what I'm going to do is to show you briefly how. I'm just going to open my phone and show you just on a mobile here. This one here. So this is my phone here, and again, this is our sort of demo intranet, if you want to call it that. There's a bunch of applications. I'm just going to minimize that and show you the task list, which is what we're interested in. Let me just switch back to my on-prem. Sorry, we've got a refresh problem here. Let me refresh my list. And we should see that particular task show up. Okay, here we go. Timesheet approval, Ben Stiller. So I'm clicking on that task. You can see it opening up a page, and it's going to provide me with all the information that I need in order to make a decision. I might be a project manager offsite, I might be on-site, I might be logging into the intranet. In this case, I'm on my phone. You can see all this information. It's 20 grand. I know about it. Please pay ASAP. And there's some instructions and information for me to make it easier for me to do my job. So here I can see approve to pay or reject. In this case, I'm going to approve to pay. I can submit that, and I'm going to have a nice day. Okay, so regardless of really what platform you're on, you can interact with K2 workflows via these tasks and via forms quite easily. And you can see that's refreshed my list on premise, and also that task disappeared from my list as well. Okay, so jumping back into my project space as my project manager, I've got my project manager hat back on. I can see that here's Project Altitude. Ben Stiller's, I've approved his 20 grand spend, and that's that information via the workflow has flowed essentially from Office 365 back into my on-premise approved customer projects list, which is pretty cool, I think. Okay. So, I mean, that's a bit of that's the end-to-end demo there. Now, what I wanted to show you as well was really, okay, well, it's one thing seeing it all operate, but how did I put it together? And I did say it was pretty easy, and I can show you from scratch exactly how to do that with relative ease. So I'm going to just add in a new custom list here. Okay. So I'm on premise. This is really to demonstrate that that Office 365 information is just as readily available on premise as well as the other way around, which I showed you before. We've got a contractor incident management, for example. So what I'm going to use is that contractor list in Office 365 to create sort of an incident management type scenario. Okay. So what I first do in this bare bones SharePoint list is I go into list settings, and I just want to set up a couple of columns that I want to capture. So for example, I'm not going to make this too over the top, but let's put in a contractor name, for example. Okay. Along with that, in our incident reporting site, so incident details, for example, or description. This has to have approver as well, so let's put in an approver. And I might put one more column in there, which is contractor mobile, for example. Okay, so very simple. Now we've got a bare bones SharePoint list. Now, how do I K2ify it? Really, it's as simple as clicking on the K2 application. Now, the K2 application in Office 365 is installed via the App Store. When you have SharePoint on-prem, you install it via the K2 for SharePoint install files. So there's a slight difference, but the functionality is very much the same. You'll see when I go to run the K2 app on a brand new list in SharePoint, I can create a new application or I can deploy a solution. So there's the ability to deploy an already built solution via the app, and I can create a new application. As you can see here, you can see the 4 components that K2 offers, or four areas of functionality around data, forms, workflow, and reports. And what data does is it creates a smart object, which is a K2 term for a wrapper or a logical business object around any of your data sources. So what this is doing is it's going to create me a smart object for my list, and from then on, when I create my forms and I work with this particular list in my workflow, I will always talk to it through the smart object. A good example is, say you had an Active Directory system and you had a HR database. You would create a smart object called employee, and you would pull some of their login information from Active Directory, and you'd pull some of their HR information to create that employee object. From then on, when I'm designing forms, I don't really care that the data is coming from Active Directory or HR. All I'm dealing with is just that employee object. And it's a very, very powerful way to, and really the reason why K2 can integrate with so many back-end systems. We have the ability to create smart objects around web services and things like that. So it's quite powerful. So what I'm going to do here is just create the smart objects, because I want to be able to talk to the list and library. I'm going to also get the K2 app to create me some forms. Okay, so it's going to go off and create me some views and create me some forms. I'm not going to create workflows or reports for now, but essentially you can use this tool and to generate some workflows and reporting for you. But when it goes off, and so it's going to go off and create me some views and forms, and views are essentially the modular components that sit on forms. You can have multiple views on forms, and underlying those views is the smart objects. So if you think of, I'll use the employee example again. If you have an employee smart object and you want to create a view of it, K2 will automatically generate a view from your smart object. It knows what columns sit in the data source. So it'll go away to Active Directory and go away to HR database, look at those particular columns, and then generate a view with all those particular fields relating to those columns. So K2 is quite smart in that regard. It'll go off and do a lot of the work for us. So here I have an edit, and a display form. So obviously for creating new items in my contractor incident management library, I can edit items, and this particular form will show up, and a display form. So it just overrides the SharePoint 2013 forms, and then that allows me to modify them in the K2 tools and connect them up to all different smart objects to get some very rich functionality. So let's have a look at the new contractor incident management form. So I'm going to modify this one. I can just click on edit. The K2 Designer will open, so you can still see this is sort of all within the SharePoint 2013 app. And you can see a bare bones view over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just rename the title. I'm going to check out this particular view to edit it, and I'm going to change title to maybe incident title. Okay, so I can go through and I can modify some of these controls and hook them up to some of the smart objects. In this case, the contractor name, I want to get the contractor name from my Office 365 data, and what I want to use, what control I want to use to do that is I'm just going to wire it up to the picker, because that's what I showed you earlier. Okay, the picker allows me to type in partial letters, for example, and then it'll go off to the data source and pull back the items that match what I'm typing in, right? So here is down the right-hand side, you can see data source, and I have to wire it up to my data source, which is obviously a smart object. Okay, so the smart object I want here is the SharePoint 2013 smart object, which is the Office 365 one, and that is the library there, or the site, and then I've got lists, and then I've got my contractor list there. Okay, so that's the smart object we want. Now, the method and the filter properties, I mean, I don't want to filter on everything, so so basically when I type in and it goes to do a search, what do I want to search on? Well, in this case, I just want to search on title and maybe vendor. by selecting vendor, I can start to type a vendor name and it will return results as well. So it's quite flexible in that regard. The identifier, I'm going to go with title, and also what I'm going to display to the end user filling out this particular form is maybe I want title, but I'm actually in brackets. I'm also going to put in the vendor name because there might be two people with the same name, and by putting the vendor in there, I can also see the vendor information. Okay, so that's the contractor name. So incident details, I might want to change that to quite a large, like a text area or something like that, just to give me a bit more room. I'm going to give it 10 or so lines so I can put more information in there. And for example, approver, now I'm going to change that to a autocomplete control, which is as I type, it will automatically go away and drop down a nice Ajax type list for me to select a user from in this case. So again, I just want to wire that up to a data source. That data source is going to be Active Directory. So you can see how easy it is to really point your controls or build a rich form with various types of data in it and make it really quite usable very quickly. I'm going to go with name, and I'm going to show the display name. Just makes a bit more sense to people than the domain /username. Okay, contractor mobile, I'm just going to make that read-only, and what I'm also going to do is the power of K2, I can use rules. So when my particular contractor name changes, I'm just going to go in there and build a rule, but when the control is changed, I'm going to transfer some information, which is the mobile number of the contractor into my contractor mobile text box. Okay, so let me just drill into, you can see there's my smart object for my contractor, so I can see all the information from the particular contractor. It's all available to me, and I drop it into my contractor mobile box, mobile text box down there. Okay, so simple rule, quite powerful in the end. I'm just going to finish that. I'm going to check it in, and let's just run it. Okay, so there's my contractor incident management. Incident title is shirt ripped, or stubbed toe maybe. Okay, contractor name, so I've got a picker again. So if we have a look at that, you can see that that's going off to Office 365 and pulling back all the information that's in my contractor list, and you can see it's also added in the vendor in brackets as well for me. I can put in some incident descriptions. Approver, remember this is an autocomplete wired up to Active Directory, so if I search for myself, it starts to resolve it, and I can select my name. And you can see I've got a read-only contractor mobile box as well. So hopefully that gives you sort of an overview of how you can build rich applications really, or forms and views and tools in Office 365 to really help productivity for your business apps, and also use workflows and things like that to help the business process flow back into on-site or on-prem data sources. Remember, it's not just SharePoint, it is any data source that K2 can connect to, and there is a ton of them, including web services, Salesforce, and all sorts of things. Okay, so I hope that gives you an overview. It wasn't meant to be too technical, but hopefully you could follow the business process example, and it gives you some ideas around what you can do. I'll just hand back to Tony.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. As you said, not too technical. Certainly integrated a few systems there together on premise and the cloud, and hooked into CRM. I hope that was shedding some light and painting a few scenarios that some of you could think about or apply to some of your business scenarios. So I'd like to open up the floor to some questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the question section. On the side panel, I see we've got a few questions in here already. Just get my panel open so we can go through those. Darren wants to know if we can share the demo. Yes, of course we will, Darren. Question about integrating into Active Directory. This is from Mitch.
So I think just on the AD question, I think if I understand the question, I think you do need to set up obviously some settings to enable K2 to talk to Active Directory. But essentially, once you're set up, you know, that control that you saw, the picker or any of the other ones for that matter, can use the smart object to Active Directory to pull back data, and you can filter. You can pull back just from groups. You can pull back. You can pass a whole bunch of filtering in there as well. So I hope that sort of answers your question there.
So Rico wants to know, thought what happened to Office 365, but you were going to show how to build in Office 365. Well, the key answer to that question, Rico, is that K2 offers feature parity between on-premise, SharePoint, and Office 365. It doesn't matter which one of those environments we're in or demo to you, the functionality is exactly the same. So I think Ian did touch on Office 365 and show you how we pulled data from that back to on-premise SharePoint. In his runtime demo, we showed you how we accessed Office 365 and connected back to on-premise SharePoint. So we can handle those hybrid scenarios. From a K2 application point of view, Ian touched on the app. Essentially, you need to install the app in the K2 app in whichever environment you have, and that app needs to talk back to your K2 server. So you need a K2 server installed somewhere, be that on-premise or in the cloud as well. And in that way, we can give you feature parity between your Office 365 and your SharePoint on-premise environment. There's another question here from Santo. Does this support legacy systems? Santo, one of the major benefits of K2 is our ability to integrate into line of business systems using the smart object technology that Ian was talking about. We've got a number of out-of-the-box connectors that will allow you to connect to back-end systems like SQL, Oracle, SharePoint, as you've seen. But one of the major benefits of the K2 platform is that we've got an extensive API behind the platform, and we can also go and create custom connectors to connect to legacy systems. So we've got a very strong and very big worldwide user community that might be able to help you connect to an existing legacy system. K2 runs in 80 countries across the world, so you can imagine the kind of back-end systems that we've had to integrate with before. So if you go to our community portal, which is called community.k2.com, under the market section, you'll find a whole bunch of connectors that have been published by our community. So there might be something there that can help you connect to a legacy system. Otherwise, we can always create you a custom connector. And also over and above the sort of out-of-the-box standard connectors, we also have dynamic connectors that we can point to any web service. And if you're a developer and you can write C# code, we've also got an assembly connector that we can point to your custom code and actually do a reflection against that code and generate smart objects against that as well. So there's hundreds of scenarios. We can talk about K2 and integration into systems for another hour, to be honest. Is Appit for Office 365 ready to use yet? Right, so let's just address the question of what Appit is. If some of you go to our website or read our marketing material, you'll see information about K2 Appit. So So what K2 Appit is a K2 software as a service offering that we offer around Office 365. That product has been launched in the United States to date and is currently being rolled out, we're currently rolling that out into the European markets at the moment. So we expect to have Appit in Australia in the near future. I can't give you an exact date as to when that would happen. We've obviously been waiting for Microsoft to get its data centers up for the Azure environment, and as you know, in March they finally brought Office 365 capability onshore. So that answers a lot of the data sovereignty questions which we've always been challenged with. So now that we've got those out of the way, I'm sure our management will take a decision in the near future on when to bring Appit, launch Appit to Australia. Another question there, am I correct that you had a single workflow spanning Office 365 and SharePoint on-premise? Yes, we most certainly did have that. Any difference in online SharePoint and Office 365? We've already answered that. We offer you feature parity between those environments. Can K2 work without an on-premise K2 server? I touched on that. You need a K2 server, whether that server is on-premise or hosted in the cloud. Essentially, that app needs to talk back to your K2 server. And from a SharePoint point of view, we don't install any features on SharePoint. Obviously, in Office 365, we can't go and install custom apps. Hence your need for a K2 server to support your solution. So there's a very light footprint of what gets installed on SharePoint. Do you have a deployment tool for solutions built on-premise to the cloud? Yes, we certainly do. We have package and deployment tools. We'll help you package up your workflow and your forms. You can also package up, I think in the latest version of K2, we give you the ability to package up your SharePoint artifacts as well as part of that package. And if you've used K2 Smart Objects in their default mode, which will store data within the K2 database, they'll be able to package up that data for you as well into your Smart Objects. Obviously, that won't apply if you've stored data in custom line of business systems. But certainly, our package and deployment tools are maturing very well and help you in those scenarios. What will be the estimate cost to set up K2? Well, it's as simple as installing that app and pointing it back to your K2 server. Most quotations that we send out today, we'll probably allocate a day to install K2. The time-consuming part is not necessarily installing K2, but obviously working through an organization's policies and getting all the right user accounts set up and Active Directory permissions. That's typically what takes most of the time in setting that up. All right, so we're almost out of time. I hope I answered most of your questions. If I didn't, we'll certainly respond to them afterwards. So thank you for your time today. Yes, we'll make a recording of the session available to you as well as the slide deck. So please enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to chatting to you in the near future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.